Okay. Dear audience, welcome one more day to the second interview of this creators series in my Creative Sensei blog and YouTube channel. Today I'm going to introduce you to SteveRasmussen. He will pronounce his name much better than I do. Steve and I met, I'm not going to say how many years ago, but at the University of Edinburgh Shukokai Karate Club. And so we are martial arts buddies. And now over time we became creative buddies. And that's all we're going to talk about today, about a little bit of his history and his projects and what he thinks about creativity and other topics. So Steve, if you want to introduce yourself in a brief sentence or something, just welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bago. I appreciate you having me on the show. It's very exciting. So, yeah, we've been a long time. No, we won't say long time. We've known each other for quite a while, and it's true. We met through martial arts, but we always had this commonality of creativity. And I would define you as a closet creative when I met you. You were like dabbling, and you slowly started to come out of your shell, and maybe not moving away from your science and your intellectual or academic background, but expanding on it, let's say, and maybe bridging, that gap between, let's say, the left mind and the right mind. So I think that's my assessment of you, and so it's so great to see you doing wonderful things and exploring many concepts and ideas, and I always enjoy watching what you're working on. So again, thanks for having me on this your program. So.
Yes, well, thank you. But it was about talking about yourself, not about me. If you want to summarize your trajectory briefly.
It's a long conversation. I mean, what am I? What am I? I guess archetype-wise, I'm an artist, meaning I'm someone who identifies with a sort of process about understanding oneself and life through various practices that generally create something that you put into the world, I guess. So, we met through martial arts, but I always say that I'm an artist, not a fighter. So I use even martial arts as a tool for my own self-exploration. I think there's a lot of psychological aspects to it. Why one goes into the martial arts is one reason, and then why one stays and where they ultimately end up is another. So for me, I think I would identify myself as an artist and someone who also likes to move and express myself. So I think there's a combination of different aspects.
Okay, fantastic. I agree. I know you move. Look, I have 10 questions for you. So formulated in a new way, which I'm going to show you a keyword, and you might answer whatever comes up to mind there. And then if I didn't get enough or I want to know more, I'll ask you more questions. But first, it will be like 10 mini sections, okay? The first one is
childhood.
Yeah.
Nice one.
Yeah.
Well, my childhood, as far as creativity goes, I was really fortunate. I think as a lot of people growing up, they do dabble in creativity, but very few continue with it. And there's various reasons why, I think. And I was really fortunate to have the support of my family, specifically my mother, who was, to this day is my #1 fan. So I'm very lucky that she's always encouraging me to be happy, to be healthy, and to follow, things that and choices in my life that lead towards that. So creativity for me is something that's been part of me, part of my DNA, and therefore I'm very fortunate that I can make decisions and have the support of my family based on which is obvious, a sacrifice at times to choose creativity over, let's say, stability, if you want to use another. Not that you can't have both together. We strive to have that, but so I'm very lucky to have that. So I remember, for example, I would draw and I would play with colors and I would like to sort of paint, and I'd show it to my mother and she'd be like, wow, this is so beautiful. And she'd put it on the wall. So for me that was there's many connections there with love, with acceptance, with encouragement, the unconditional aspects of that. So for me, that's always been embedded in me. So I guess in a way, as a creative, we're often said that an artist or a creative is very sensitive, and I think there's truth in that, and we have to become more hardened over time as we professionalize our practices, and we work with clients who have various needs, and we have to fit into what they require. But I was really lucky to start out in the sense of having that kind of encouragement, that foundation. So I guess in a way, I'm still that child who explores in a curious, naive sort of way. And I think that is who I try to continue to be with all my practices, even if I've done martial arts or creativity all of my life. I really try to keep that open-mindedness and that curiosity and the exploration, and to be humble. And the martial arts teaches that humility, which I think is a component that is really important to have, and it allows us a lot of freedom. Because if you think of it from a the perspective of the world, if we have a skill to take care of ourselves, to protect ourselves, and I define self-defense as not just self-defense as in dealing with someone else. You're dealing with external stress or anxiety. You have this capacity to stay healthy. That is first self-defense, both mind and body, to be healthy. So I think these all kind of tie in for me. And so when you go into the world and you have to deliver your creativity, it's a tricky transition. But that was the foundation from my childhood, to sum up your question.
Now I have next question.
Creativity. Yeah. So how would I define creativity?
Yes, what it means for you.
How do I apply creativity?
It, how important it is for the world, and what it means for you. Tricky question.
It's a broad question. I think with creativity, I think of freedom, exploration. Again, there's that curiosity. There's that giving yourself a license to, as the quote says, to take time to waste time. This idea of putting time aside where you waste it. And what happens, they say that a lot of ideas are birthed out of boredom. And I really love that framework, that you give yourself time away from everything, which could be, in most cases, people, technology, etc. And during this time, you become a little bored. And through boredom, your mind drifts. And through that, you start to think, okay, I have this idea. And then you follow that idea, whether that's visual or whatever your medium is for creativity, and you see where that goes. So I think that there's a birth of creativity that comes out of that boredom. If you don't allow yourself that time, then it doesn't happen. Maybe it happens in the shower, maybe it happens when you're washing dishes. These are natural, everyday flow states, which I find is really interesting. And I try to put myself into these flow states. Walking in the land this morning, I enter a flow state where my body is doing something repetitive and my mind is able to float and to kind of, maybe it's exploring, but it's in one way letting go of a lot of things, another way it's opening up to other ideas that are beyond the left brain, the conscious brain. And I think that's really important as well, part of my process. So creativity is so broad. I guess it's a thing that you can inject into many things. If I'm practicing my martial art, Silat, I'm looking to think, okay, what can this particular tool teach me about moving in a more effective or more expressive or more functional way? So for me, creativity is like something you choose to consciously inject into whatever you do. So I don't believe it's necessarily visual. I think creativity is so many things. Visual is only one possible realm of expression. And I think that creativity can happen in the way you move, in the way you wash your dishes, in the way you go from one position to another. You can do it in a way that triggers a different state of mind and a different shift. And I think that connects to my interest in performance as well, because that's also a way to shift one state and externally it looks like you're doing something for the purpose of showing something, but actually internally there's a lot of things that are happening with your own self-awareness, your own exploration, your own sense of personal expression, and that is also creativity for me.
Funny you mentioned this, washing the dishes, because I do it by hand, like many people. And so I'm picking up a challenge because I have it every day. How to be creative while doing the dishes. I'm gonna see what I can come up with. Probably it's gonna be more fun. Anyway, let's move on to the next keyword.
Practice.
Let's move on to the next keyword.
Practice.
What do you make of it?
I love that word, practice. I heard that recently, and someone asked me, of course, I'm living in Madrid, living in Spain, and people will say sometimes, they'll ask me to correct them when they're speaking in English. So do you say practice martial arts or do you train it? And it's interesting because what's happened when I'm evolving my understanding of English and started writing, through teaching English in Spain, I gained a huge appreciation for my own language. Started writing, started reading, started really appreciating a lot of things, and it changed my thought process. So people would ask, do you say practice or train? So very often there's an answer that you say, okay, well in yoga we would say practice yoga, you practice martial arts, you train CrossFit. But it got me thinking, and I love this idea that we're always practicing. So it gives us a license that we are always exploring. So if I go to the park and I say, I'm just going to practice. So after walking, go to the park, take off my shoes, bare feet, grounding, there's a lot of science behind that. The wet grass on the feet after 7 weeks inside without any contact. Let's just say it was highly, highly stimulating. This is something that I realize that every day, all the things I do as my health routines or my creative practices, I just said it, they're practices. I'm practicing. It doesn't mean I'm not professional or I don't know what I like or what I'm good at, but it allows me the freedom to explore different things without having sort of a fixed lens, let's say, all the time on one particular thing. So practice for me is everything. You could argue life is a practice. When you're in a relationship, that's a practice. That's an understanding of yourself through someone else, understanding of people in general, and it creates different challenges to understand yourself better. This is practice. This is in karate or in karate do or any this idea of do or way. It's a practice. It's a way of living, not because you're fixed. It's because your way of looking at life and the world has a certain dimension that allows for practice, exploration, and I really love that. And I think that's something I hold true to every day.
I think that links in nicely with the next item of the questions. You mentioned practice as a more relaxed approach to what you need to do, because they say practice makes perfect, or perfect practice makes perfect. But the practice is kind of the training mode, basically, for the actual
work. Okay, work.
Or maybe not. Just
yeah.
I think that links in nicely with the next item of the questions. You mentioned practice as a more relaxed approach to what you need to do, because they say practice makes perfect, or perfect practice makes perfect. But the practice is kind of the training mode, basically, for the actual
work. Okay.
Or maybe not. Just share your thoughts on this, please.
Yeah. I think work is a 4-letter word. It's a bit dirty because I think I'm careful not to work. I'm careful not to use the word work, because if I say now I have to work, most people change their state of mind. And fortunately, as a creative and also a teacher, also as an aspiring commercial actor, my work is is many things. You know, it's so connected. There's no one type of work. It reminds me of my meditation teacher, Andreas. He had mentioned before, to do the work, you have to do the work. You know, and I like this more, like do the work. That means that there's certain things you should be doing, you know you should be doing, and you have to put some discipline to it. So I like it in that way, but most times people say, I have to go to work. They're depressed. It's not really a positive thing. I can't wait to go to work. I can't wait to go and explore my creative possibilities or to do what I love to do. That's different. So I think using language also is something I've appreciated more and more in the last 7 years being in Spain. And it's really important to be careful how you use language. So when you show me that word work, I have an old definition, which I still need to realize. I realize now I need to dissolve, because there's a better way to look at it. Maybe work is discipline. And I agree with discipline.
Yeah, like hard work. You need to be disciplined about it. It's funny because there are two ways to kind of merge. When you do practice something, it's because you want to learn to reach, or you want to reach a certain standard to do a work of certain quality, or to create a work of certain quality. So it's kind of a training wheels versus this. And this guy, Doc O'Neill, I can't remember right now his surname, from verbal to visual, he teaches people to sketchnote, and he has a whole line of thought regarding to learning in public, which is something leading from you start your practice in private. You do experiment freely, but there is a point where you can start sharing this early on in your process, in your learning process, before you reach that whatever standard you set up to reach, to present your work, your finished, polished work. So it's kind of, what you mention is more about a mindset, like take from the word work, the appropriate mindset. If it's discipline is what you need to develop from beginning practice to something you can share. Doesn't need to be polished or finished, but to reach certain standard. So I think it's a whole world in between.
Absolutely. I like the way you're explaining it. I can't help but think about my foundations of martial arts through my sensei Ron Fagan in Canada, and he's such a huge influence on me. And one of the things I really am most grateful for is that I remember being 5 months, 6 months testing for my yellow belt, and I remember within a week after that, new people came into the class, and I remember my sensei saying, "Hey, Stephen, you teach front kick." Mr. Rasmussen, he used to always call me. So he would say, "Oh, you know how to do front kick, teach it." So and that was like 6 months into karate. So what's happened with me is that I was really fortunate that I was in an environment where I was encouraged from the beginning to be a teacher. So there was no like, after 10 years, maybe I'm told, okay, now you're authorized to teach. Now you begin that. And what happens? We know how it happens. We know that if someone is at 10 years in something, or let's say 10, 15, 20 years, working towards some level of mastery, which is another conversation itself, if you suddenly introduce teaching at that point, what happens? They're a beginner. And also you could argue, based on what you were saying there, maybe you even have more fear or hesitation in order to go into that. Because there's such a difference, it's such a contrast between your skill level as a practitioner and your ability to transmit that to other people. There's a gap which is huge. And to bridge that gap is so difficult. Then you have to set aside your ego, be more humble, realize that you have a very low skill level as a teacher, and therefore you have to overcome that. Whereas you start from the beginning, you're already performing, because when you teach, you perform. I think a lot of things are performance. When I'm doing a photo shoot, I am performing. You might think that it's the subject that is the core. I think as the photographer, as the one who's orchestrating and directing, that is the core, that is the key performance that is most crucial for creating the environment and the stimulus response and the relationship and the connection you have with the subject. So I think that when you teach, you have the same thing. So for me, that was a big aspect of what I do, and I'm very fortunate and very grateful for that.